Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. We are going to be reading a story, but first up we are going to be reading the Bible, and then we're going to first we're going to be doing the verse of the day, then we're going to be reading the Bible, and then we're going to be doing the synopsis, and then we're going to be reading the Return of the King. Today it's a really short chapter, so sorry, I'm trying to get the verse here. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell on this video. Really short chapter, so let's get straight into it. 1 Samuel 26:23. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put out my hand against the Lord and anointed. I hope you guys enjoyed the verse of the day. Now it's time to do Bible time. Here we go.
Hello, how are you doing? This is also the last day that I get to have this, because I have to go back to real work tomorrow instead of telework. So, it is what it is. Alright, so, and now we are on Acts chapter 22. Remember, Paul was about to speak to the people at they just arrested him and put him in custody, and it seems like the Tribune thought that he was somebody else that was inciting violence, and of course Paul was not that person, and so now he's about to address the crowd. Is there a problem? Okay, let me first wait for Kimmy to get back. Alright, and we're on Acts chapter 22. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible, and let me begin. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even more quiet, and he said, I am a Jew born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, as all of you are this day. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as the high priest and the whole council of elders can bear me witness. From them I received letters to the brothers, and I journeyed toward Damascus to take these also who were there and bring them in bonds to Jerusalem to be punished. As I was on my way and drew near to Damascus about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone around me, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not understand the voice of one who was speaking to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, Rise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all that is appointed for you to do. And since I could not see because of the brightness of that light, I was led by the hand by those who were with me, and came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me, and standing by me said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very hour I received my sight, and saw him. And he said, The God of our fathers appointed you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear a voice from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to everyone of what you have seen and heard. And now, why do you wait? Rise and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on his name. When I had returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, I fell into a trance, and I saw him saying to me, 'Make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me.' And I said, 'Lord, they themselves know that in one synagogue after another I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was being shed, I myself was standing by and approving and watching over the garments of those who killed him.' And he said to me, 'Go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles.'" Up to this word they listened to him. Then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live." And as they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, the tribune ordered them to be brought into the barracks, saying that he should be examined by flogging to find out why they were shouting against him like this. But when they had stretched him out for the whips, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Is it lawful for you to flog a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the tribune and said to him, "What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman citizen." So the tribune came and said to him, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" And he said, "Yes." The tribune answered, I bought this citizenship for a large sum." Paul said, "But I am a citizen by birth." So those who were about to examine him withdrew from him immediately, and the tribune also was afraid, for he realized that Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet, and he brought Paul down and set him before them. Chapter 23. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, "Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? And yet contrary to the law you order me to be struck?" Those who stood by said, "Would you revile God's high priest?" And Paul said, "I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people." Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. It is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial." And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Then a great clamor rose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. "We find nothing wrong in this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?" And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome." When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now therefore you, along with the council, give notice to the tribune to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly, and we are ready to kill him before he comes near." Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, so he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul the prisoner called me and asked me to bring this young man to you." and he has something to say to you." The tribune took him by the hand, and going aside asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire some more closely about him. But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent." So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things." Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter to this effect: "Claudius Lysias, to his excellency the governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris, and on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him. When they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from, and when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive." And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. Chapter 24. We're reading 3 chapters today because the Tolkien is very short. So this is chapter 24. "And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus. They laid before the governor their case against Paul, and when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, 'Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him.' The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way which they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Now after several years I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. While I was doing so, they found me purified in the temple, without any crowd or tumult. But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you and to make an accusation should they have anything against me. Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council, other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them. It is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, When Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending to his needs. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given him by Paul, so he sent for him often and conversed with him. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. That's where we're going to stop for today. I will just say Drusilla is a very uncommon name that I had to interact with a woman named Drusilla in the last week, which is kind of interesting. Because it's not a very common name in our culture, for sure. All right, so now we are on to Return of the King. Hi, Becca! We're so glad that you're here. The next chapter is called Homeward Bound, but first I'm going to tell you about many partings. Basically, they came out of Minas Tirith. The party went and they laid Theoden to rest in Edoras. Gimli and Legolas went off to the caves. They went off to Fangorn Forest. They had a grand adventure there. They met with Treebeard, who has the keys to Orthanc. And then, but Saruman had escaped from Orthanc. Treebeard let him go. And then they met Saruman and Wormtongue on the road. And Saruman had all of his magic powers and destroyed them as they were passing on the road. And that is the end of Lord of the Rings. So the ring was destroyed, but so was the fellowship.
Oh, Dad, don't forget, he also got so annoyed with Wormtongue, he turned him into a worm.
Or maybe he turned him into a toad. All right, here's Kimberly to say how it really happened.
Maybe he turned him into a rat.
Why are you not over here?
Ah! Chrissy!
Okay, Chrissy, come on, over here.
Sorry, Chrissy thinks that it's, people are here, they should be petting me. So what actually happened was Saruman, he was like literally barely skin and bone. Like, that is a generous description. And Wormtongue was even worse. Like, they were barely recognizable human beings. If they were that to begin with, I don't know. And then they talked for a bit, and they're like, hey, we could give you a second chance. And then he's like, nope. And then, he was like, he even, like, started begging. And, I think it was Pippin. It was Merry or Pippin. They felt bad for him, and they're like, hey, I'll give back some of this, tobacco that I stole from you. And then he's like, wait, you stole that? Oh, come on.
Stolen, it was spoils of war.
Yeah. And
Saruman called him a thief.
yeah. He took it personally. And then he kept the bag though, so and that was about it, actually. They went to visited Bilbo, and then they're on their way back to the Shire.
Bilbo, like, had all kinds of energy, and they played basketball together.
Bilbo was really, really old. Since
And
the ring,
tired.
yeah. since the ring got destroyed, he was feeling like really, really old because the ring gave him extra life. Like think about playing Mario, and then you get hit by a Goomba and you die, and then you get resurrected from the dead because of a mushroom. Just replace Mario with Bilbo, the mushroom with the ring. I'm gonna hand it off to Dad, who's gonna read a story that does not involve Mario at all.
All right. So, I'm back. I'm also front. And Mario and Luigi went to... Oh, never mind. That is a different story. So, this is chapter 7, Homeward Bound. And let me just change my camera angle just a little bit. We are so excited. We are almost done with this book. We are ready to go on to the next book, and we're not going to say what it is. And I haven't 100% decided which book of the Bible. If you have any suggestions, let me know. It's going to be an Old Testament book, and it's going to be one of my 39 favorites.
Esther.
So, we already read Esther. All right, so this is chapter 7, Homeward Bound. At last the hobbits had their faces turned toward home. They were eager now to see the Shire again, but at first they rode only slowly, for Frodo had been ill at ease. When they came to the ford of Bruinen, he had halted and seemed loth to ride into the stream, and they noted that for a while his eyes appeared not to see them or things about him. All that day he was silent. It was the 6th of October. "Are you in pain, Frodo?" said Gandalf quietly as he rode by Frodo's side. "Well, yes, I am," said Frodo. "It is my shoulder. The wound aches, and the memory of darkness is heavy on me. It was a year ago today." "Alas, there are some wounds that cannot be wholly cured," said Gandalf. "I fear it may be so with mine," said Frodo. "There is no real going back. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. I am wounded with knife, sting, and tooth, and a long burden. Where shall I find rest?" Gandalf did not answer. By the end of the next day, the pain and unease had passed, and Frodo was merry again, as merry as if he did not remember the blackness of the day before. After that, the journey went well, and the days went quickly by, for they rode at leisure, and often they lingered in the fair woodlands where the leaves were red and the yellow in the autumn sun. At length they came to Weathertop, and it was then drawing toward evening, and the shadow of the hill lay dark on the road. Then Frodo begged them to hasten, and he would not look toward that hill, but rode through its shadow with head bowed and cloak drawn close about him. That night the weather changed, and a wind came from the west laden with rain, and it blew loud and chill, and the yellow leaves whirled like birds in the air. When they came to the cheatwood, already the boughs were almost bare, and a great curtain of rain veiled Bree Hill from their sight. So it was that near the end of a wild and wet evening in the last days of October, the 5 travelers rode up the climbing road and came to the south gate of Bree. It was locked fast, and the rain blew in their faces, and in the darkening sky low clouds went hurrying by, and their hearts sank a little, for they had expected more welcome. When they had called many times, at last the gatekeeper came out, and they saw that he carried a great cudgel. He looked at them with fear and suspicion, but when he saw that Gandalf was there, and that his companions were hobbits, in spite of their strange gear, then he brightened and wished them welcome. "Come in," he said, unlocking the gate. "We won't stay for news out here in the cold and the wet, a ruffianly evening, but old Barley will no doubt give you a welcome at the Pony, and there you'll hear all there is to hear." "And there you'll hear later all that we say and more," laughed Gandalf. "How is Harry?" Harry? Okay. The gatekeeper scowled. "Gone," he said. "But you'd best ask Barliman. Good evening." "Good evening to you," they said, and passed through, and they noticed that behind the hedge at the roadside a long low hut had been built, and a number of men had come out and were staring at them over the fence. When they came to Bill Ferny's house, they saw that the hedge was tattered and unkempt, and the windows were all boarded up. "Do you think you killed him with that apple, Sam?" said Pippin. "I'm not so hopeful, Mr. Pippin," said Sam, "but I'd like to know what became of that poor pony. He's been on my mind many a time, and the wolves howling and all." At last it came to the prancing pony, and that at least looked outwardly unchanged, and there were lights behind the red curtains in the lower windows. They rang the bell, and Nob came to the door and opened it a crack and peeped through, and when he saw them standing under the lamp he gave a cry of surprise. "Mr. Butterbur, master!" he shouted. "They've come back!" "Oh, they have they? I'll learn them," came Butterbur's voice, and out he came with a rush, and he had a club in his hand, but when he saw who they were, he stopped short, and the black scowl on his face changed to wonder and delight. "Nob, you woolly-pated ninny," he cried, "can't you give old friends their names? You shouldn't go scaring me like that, with times as they are. Well, well, and where have you come from? I never expected to see any of you folk again, and that's a fact, going off into the wild with that Strider and all those black men about. But I'm right glad to see you, and none more than Gandalf. Come in, come in. The same rooms as before, they're free. Indeed, most rooms are empty these days, as I'll not hide from you, for you'll find it out soon enough, and I'll see what can be done about supper as soon as may be, but I'm short-handed at present. Hey, Nob, you slow coach, tell Bob. But there, I'm forgetting. Bob's gone. Goes home to his folk at nightfall now. Well, take the guest ponies to the stables. Nob! And you'll be taking your horse to the stable yourself, Gandalf, I don't doubt. A fine beast, as I said when I first set eyes on him. Well, come in, make yourselves at home." Mr. Butterbur had at any rate not changed his manner of talking, and still seemed to live in his old breathless bustle, and yet there was hardly anybody about, and all was quiet. From the common room there came a low murmur of no more than 2 or 3 voices, and seen closer in the light of 2 candles that he lit and carried before them, the landlord's face looked rather wrinkled and careworn. He led them down the passage to the parlor that they had used on that strange night more than a year ago, and they followed him, a little disquieted, for it seemed plain to them that old Barliman was putting a brave face on some trouble. Things were not what they had been, but they said nothing and waited. As they expected, Mr. Butterbur came to the parlor after supper to see if all had been to their liking, as indeed it had. No change for the worse had yet come upon the beer or the victuals at the Pony, at any rate. "Now I won't make so bold as to suggest you should come to the common room tonight," said Butterbur. "You'll be tired, and there isn't many folk there this evening anyway, but if you could spare me half an hour before you go to your beds, I would dearly like to have some talk with you, quiet-like, by ourselves." "That is just what we should like, too," said Gandalf. "We are not tired. We have been taking things easy. We were wet, cold, and hungry, but all that you have cured. Come, sit down, and if you have any pipe-weed, we'll bless you." "Well, if you'd called for anything else, I'd have been happier," said Butterbur. "That's just the thing that we're short of, seeing how we've only got what we grow ourselves, and that's not enough. There's none to be had from the Shire these days, but I'll do what I can." When he came back, he brought them enough to last them for a day or 2, a wad of uncut leaf. "Southlench," he said, "and the best we have, but not the match of South Farthing, as I've always said, though I'm all for Bree in most matters, begging your pardon." They put him in a large chair by the wood fire, and Gandalf sat on the other side of the hearth, and the hobbits in low chairs between them, and then they talked for many times half an hour, and exchanged all such news as Mr. Butterbur wished to hear or give. Most of the things which they had to tell were a mere wonder and bewilderment to their host, and far beyond his vision, and they brought forth few comments other than "You don't say," often repeated in defiance of the evidence of Mr. Butterbur's own ears. "You don't say, Mr. Baggins, or is it Underhill? I'm getting so mixed up. You don't say, Master Gandalf. Well, I never. Who'd have thought it in our times?" But he did say much on his own account. Things were far from well, he would say. Business was not even fair. It was downright bad. No one comes nigh Bree now from outside, he said, and the inside folks, they stay at home mostly and keep their doors barred. And it all comes of those newcomers and gangrels that began coming up the Greenway last year, as you may remember, but more came later. Some were just poor bodies running away from trouble, but most were bad men, full of thievery and mischief, and there was trouble right here in Bree, bad trouble. Why, we had a real set to, and there were some folk killed dead, if you'll believe me. "I will indeed," said Gandalf. "How many?" 3 and 2, said Butterbur, referring to the big folk and the little. "There was poor Mat Heathertoes, and Rowley Appledore, and little Tom Pickthorn from over the hill, and Willie Banks from up away, and one of the Underhills from Staddle. All good fellows, and they're missed, and Harry Goatleaf that used to be on the west gate, and that Bill Ferny, they came in on the stranger's side, and they've gone off with them, and it's my belief they let them in. On the night of the fight, I mean, and that was after we showed them the gates and pushed them out, before the year's end, that was, and the fight was early in the new year after the heavy snow we had, and now we're gone for robbers and live outside. They're gone for robbers and live outside, hiding in the woods beyond Arquette, and out of the wilds, north away. It's like a bit of the bad old times tales tell of, I say. It isn't safe on the road, and nobody goes far, and folk lock up early. We have to keep watchers all around the fence, and put a lot of men on the gates at nights." "Well, no one troubled us," said Pippin, "and we came along slowly, and kept no watch. We thought we'd left all trouble behind us." "Ah, that you haven't, master. More's the pity," said Butterbur. "But it's no wonder they left you alone. They wouldn't go for armed folk, with swords and helmets and shields and all. Make them think twice, that would. And I must say, it put me aback a bit when I saw you." Then the hobbits suddenly realized that people had looked at them with amazement, not out of surprise at the return so much as in wonder at their gear. They themselves had become so used to warfare and to riding in well-arrayed companies that they had quite forgotten that the bright mail peeping from under their cloaks, and the helms of Gondor and the Mark, and the fair devices of their shields would seem outlandish in their own country. And Gandalf, too, was now riding on his tall grey horse, all clad in white, with a grey mantle of blue and silver over all, and the long sword glamdring at his side. Gandalf laughed. "Well, well," he said, "if they are afraid of just 5 of us, then we have met worse enemies on our travels. But at any rate, they will give you peace at night while we stay." "How long will that be?" said Butterbur. "I'll not deny we should be glad to have you about for a bit. You see, we're not used to such troubles, and the rangers have all gone away, folk tell me. I don't think we've rightly understood till now what they did for us, for there's been worse than robbers about. Wolves were howling round the fences last winter, and there's dark shapes in the woods, dreadful things that makes the blood run cold to think of. It's been very disturbing, if you understand me." "I expect it has," said Gandalf. "Nearly all lands have been disturbed these days, very disturbed. But cheer up, Barliman. You have been on the edge of a very great troubles, and I am only glad to hear that you have not been deeper in. But better times are coming, maybe better than any you remember. The Rangers have returned. We came back with them, and there is a king again, Barliman. He will soon be turning his mind this way. Then the Greenway will be opened again, and his messengers will come north, and there will be comings and goings, and the evil things will be driven out of the wastelands. Indeed, the waste in time will be waste no longer, and there will be people and fields where once there was wilderness." Mr. Butterbeer shook his head. "If there's a few decent, respectable folk in the roads, that won't do no harm," he said. "But we don't want no more rabble and ruffians, and we don't want no outsiders at Bree, nor near Bree at all. We want to be let alone. I don't want a whole crowd of strangers camping here and settling there and tearing up the wild country." "You will be let alone, Barlaman," said Gandalf. "There is room enough for realms between Ison and Greyflood, or along the shorelands south of the Brandywine, without anyone living within many days' ride of Bree. And many folk used to dwell away north, 100 miles or more from here, at the far end of the Greenway, on the North Downs, or by Lake Evandem." "Up away by Deadman's Dyke," said Butterbur, looking even more dubious. "That's haunted land, they say. None but robber would go there." "The rangers go there," said Gandalf. "Deadman's Dyke, you say? So it has been called for long years, but its right name, Barlaman, is Fornost Erain, Norbury of the Kings, and the king will come there again one day, and then you'll have some fair folk riding through." "Well, that sounds more hopeful, I'll allow," said Butterbur, "but it will be good for business, no doubt, so long as he lets Bree alone." "He will," said Gandalf. "He knows it and loves it." "Does he now?" said Butterbur, looking puzzled. Though I'm sure I don't know why he should, sitting in his big chair up on his great castle, hundreds of miles away, and drinking wine out of a golden cup. I shouldn't wonder. What's the pony to him, or mugs of beer? Not but what my beer's good, Gandalf. It's been uncommon good since you came in the autumn of last year, and put a good word on it, and that's been a comfort in trouble, I will say." "Ah," said Sam, "but he says your beer is always good." "He says? Of course he does. He's Strider, the chief of the Rangers. Haven't you got that into your head yet?" It went in at last, and Butterbur's face was a study in wonder. The eyes in his broad face grew round, and his mouth opened wide, and he gasped. "Strider!" he exclaimed, when he got back his breath. "Him, with a crown and all, and a golden cup? Well, what are we coming to?" "Better times for Bree, at any rate," said Gandalf. "I hope so, I'm sure," said Butterbur. "Well, this has been the nicest chat I've had in a month of Mondays, and I'll not deny that I'll sleep easier tonight and with a lighter heart. You've given me a powerful lot to think over, but I'll put that off until tomorrow, for I'm for bed, and I've no doubt you'll be glad of your beds too. Hey, Nob," he called, going to the door. "Nob, you slow coach! Nob," he said to himself, slapping his forehead. "Now what does that remind me of?" "Not another letter you've forgotten, I hope, Mr. Butterbur," said Mary. Now, Mr. Brandybook, don't go reminding me of that. But there, you've broken my thoughts. Now, where was I? Nob, stables, that was it. I've something that belongs to you. If you recollect, Bill Fernie and the horse thieving, his pony as you brought, well, it's here. Come back all of itself it did, but where it had been to, you know better than me. It was as shaggy as an old dog and as lean as a clothes rail, but it was alive. Nobbs looked after it. "What, my Bill?" cried Sam. "Well, I was born lucky, whatever my gaffer may say. There's another wish come true. Where is he?" Sam would not go to bed until he had visited Bill in his stable. The travellers stayed in Bree all the next day, and Mr. Butterbur could not complain of his business next evening at any rate. Curiosity overcame all fears, and his house was crowded. For a while, out of politeness, the hobbits visited the common room in the evening and answered a good many questions. Bree memories being retentive, Frodo was asked many times if he had written his book. "Not yet," he answered. "I am going home now to put my notes in order." He promised to deal with the amazing events at Bree, and so give a bit of interest to the book that appeared likely to treat mostly of the remote and less important affairs away south. Then one of the younger folk called for a song, but at that a hush fell, and he was frowned down, and the call was not repeated. Evidently there was no wish for any uncanny events in the common room again. No trouble by day, nor any sound by night disturbed the peace of Bree while the travelers remained there. But the next morning they got up early, for as the weather was still rainy, they wished to see the Shire before night. And it was a long ride. The Bree folk were all out to see them off, and were in merrier mood than they had been for a year. And those who had not seen the strangers in all their gear before gaped with wonder at them. And Gandalf with his white beard and the light that seemed to gleam from him, seemed to gleam from him as if his blue mantle was only a cloud over sunshine, and at the four hobbits like riders upon the errantry out of almost forgotten tales. Even those who had laughed at all the talk about the kings began to think there might be some truth in it. "Well, good luck on your road, and good luck to your homecoming," said Mr. Butterbur. "I should have warned you before that all's not well in the Shire neither, if what we hear is true. Funny goings-on, they say, but one thing drives out another, and I was full of my own troubles. But if I may be so bold, you've come back changed from your travels, and you look now like folk as can deal with troubles out of hand. I don't doubt you'll soon set it all to rights. Good luck to you, and the oftener you come back, the better I'll be pleased." They wished him farewell and rode away, and passed through the west gate and on toward the Shire. Bill the pony was with them, and as before he had a good deal of baggage, but he trotted along beside Sam and seemed well content. "I wonder what old Butterbur was hinting at," said Frodo. "I can guess some of it," said Sam gloomily. "What I saw in the mirror, trees cut down and all, and my old gaffer turned out of the row. I ought to have hurried back quicker." "And something's wrong with the South Farthing, evidently," said Merry. "There's a general shortage of pipeweed." "Whatever it is," said Pippin, "Lotho will be at the bottom of it. You can be sure of that." "Deep in, but not at the bottom," said Gandalf. "You have forgotten Saruman. He began to take an interest in the Shire before Mordor did." "Well, we've got you with us," said Merry, "so things will soon be cleared up." "I am with you at present," said Gandalf, "but soon I shall not be. I am not coming to the Shire. You must settle its affairs yourselves. That is why you have been trained for, what you have been trained for. Do you not understand? My time is over. It is no longer my task to set things to rights, nor to help folk to do so. And as for you, my dear friends, you will need no help. You are grown up now. Grown indeed very high among the great you are, and I have no longer any fear at all for any of you. But if you would know, I am turning aside soon. I am going to have a long talk with Bombadil, such a talk as I have not had in all my time. He is a moss gatherer, and I have been a stone doomed to rolling. But my rolling days are ending, and now we shall have much to say to one another." In a little while they came to the point on the east road where they had taken leave of Bombadil, and they hoped and half expected to see him standing to greet them as they went by. But there was no sign of him, and there was a grey mist on the Barrow Downs southward, and the deep veil over the old forest far away. They halted, and Frodo looked south wistfully. "I should dearly like to see the old fellow again," he said. "I wonder how he is getting on." "As well as ever, you may be sure," said Gandalf. "Quite untroubled, and I should guess not much interested in anything that we have done or seen, unless perhaps in our visits to the Ents. There may be a time later for you to go and see him, but if I were you, I should press on for now. Press on now for home, or you will not come to the Brandywine Bridge before the gates are locked." "But there aren't any gates," said Mary. "Not on the road. You know that quite well. There's the Buckland Gate, of course, but they'll let me through that any time." "There weren't any gates, you mean," said Gandalf. "I think you will find some now, and you might have more trouble even at the Buckland Gate than you think. But you'll manage all right. Goodbye, dear friends. Not for the last time, not yet. Goodbye." He turned Shadowfax off the road, and the great horse leapt the green dike that here ran beside it. And then, at a cry from Gandalf, he was gone, racing toward the Barrow Downs like a wind from the north. "Well, here we are, just the four of us that started out together," said Mary. "We have left all the rest behind, one after another. It seems almost like a dream that has slowly faded." "Not to me," said Frodo. "To me it feels more like I'm falling asleep again." That is the end of chapter 7. I told you it was very short. So chapter 8 is, in my opinion, the most confusing chapter in the whole book of all of the story, besides maybe Tom Bombadil. But Tom Bombadil is kind of fun to read. But I really am interested. I've picked up a lot of little things that Tolkien was doing with a lot of the rest of the book. Maybe I will be able to understand this one a little better on this read-through, so I'm looking forward to that. But we will have to wait until tomorrow to read The Scouring of the Shire, the penultimate chapter of The Lord of the Rings. And the first word is it. And with that, I will leave you, and God bless you. I hope you have a great evening, and we will see you again tomorrow.